Hello everyone, welcome to your second lecture of economics. In this lecture, we will be covering the second half of chapter 1, Indian economy on the eve of independence. So let's begin with our fifth topic, foreign trade under the British rule. अब तक हम फॉरेन ट्रेड में काफी कुछ पढ़ चुके हैं कि ब्रिटिश रूल के दौरान कैसे उन्होंने हमारी हैंडलूम और हैंडीक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्री को धीरे धीरे डिस्ट्रॉय किया एंड वी वर रिड्यूस्ड फ्रॉम द एक्सपोर्टर ऑफ फिनिश्ड प्रोडक्ट्स to the exporter of raw material and importer of British machine-made products. India had acquired eminence in the area of foreign trade since ancient times. The Romans used to call India the sink of world's bullion. Bullion is the precious stones and metals, and we were known in the entire world for our good quality bullion and the creative designs. But the British rule in India brought an end to it. India was a well-known exporter of finished goods such as fine cotton, silk, textiles, iron goods, wooden goods, ivory work and precious stones. But the British converted India into the net exporter of raw material and importer of finished products. It was all due to the discriminatory policy of trade and tariff pursued by the British government. The free trade, the free import and export of Indian raw material and the British machine-made products, since no duty was levied. State of India's foreign trade at the time of independence can be described in the following observations. Net exporter of primary products and importer of finished goods. जहाँ पर पहले हम finished goods export करते थे, high quality cotton, silk, fabrics, handloom, handicraft, worldwide export करते थे, and we were known internationally for that. From that, we were reduced to exporting of natural resources, the raw cotton, the raw silk, which was again then finished in the Great Britain and then again imported into India. मतलब कि जिन प्रोडक्ट्स जिन रॉ मटेरियल्स के अंदर हम खुद वैल्यू ऐड करके इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में सेल कर सकते थे उनको हम रॉ फॉर्म में एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे थे. वी वर जस्ट ड्रेनिंग आवर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज आउट ऑफ आवर नेशन. Owing to the colonial exploitation of Indian economy, India became net exporter of raw material and primary products like raw silk, cotton, wool, jute, indigo, sugar, etc. On the other hand, it became net importer of finished goods produced by the British industry क्योंकि वहाँ पे इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन चल रही थी. तो we became the market to their machine made products and that is why we became the net importer of the finished products produced by the British industry. Our imports included cotton, silk, woolen clothes besides several types of capital goods produced in England. Now, why were capital goods imported into India? Because we were at the bleak stage of the growth of this modern industry. हमारे यहाँ पर इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन उस टाइम तक आई नहीं थी and we were in need of those industries and those machineries जो कि further machine manufacture करें, the heavy industries. तो अगर हम capital goods import कर रहे हैं, it makes some sense. लेकिन वो प्रोडक्ट जो कि हम ग्लोबल मार्केट में सेल कर रहे थे, we start importing those finished products into our country. That definitely doesn't make sense. Composition of exports and imports reflected our utter backwardness of the Indian economy. Monopoly control of India's foreign trade. Now, before the advent of Britishers, हमारी काफ़ी कंट्रीज के साथ इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड्स और टाइज थे, लेकिन ब्रिटिशर्स के आने के बाद उन्होंने सिस्टमेटिकली हमारे इंटरनेशनल टाइज को धीरे धीरे कट ऑफ कर दिया फ्रॉम द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड. कैसे? हमारे इंडियन मैन्युफैक्चर्ड हैंडलूम और हैंडीक्राफ्ट प्रोडक्ट्स के ऊपर एक्सट्रीम एक्सपोर्ट ड्यूटीज लगा दी, जिसकी वजह से हमारा जो प्रोडक्ट था इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में अनकॉम्पिटिटिव हो गया. तो हमारा जो बेसिकली ट्रेड था विद द रेस्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड वो बहुत रिड्यूस हो गया एंड ब्रिटेन बिकम आवर मेजर trading partner in the rest of the world. During the British rule, exports and imports of the country came under monopoly control of the British government. In this context, two observations are of critical significance. More than 50% of India's foreign trade was directed towards Great Britain, while exports of primary products from India supplied inputs to the British industry. Imports of finished goods from Britain provided a huge market to the British industry. As we have already read. In the box if you will see कि उसी दौरान in 1869 there was the opening of Suez Canal. अब अभी तक हम जो ब्रिटेन के साथ इम्पोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट करते थे उसमें जो ट्रांसपोर्टेशन कॉस्ट आती थी वो बहुत ज़्यादा ह्यूज होती थी बिकॉज वी हैड टू मूव द रूट इन्वॉल्व थ्रू द अफ्रीकन कॉन्टिनेंट. ट्रांसपोर्टेशन कॉस्ट जिसकी वजह से बहुत ज़्यादा होती थी. लेकिन विद द ओपनिंग ऑफ स्विस कैनाल the import and export, the trading with Britain became even more easier and cheaper, जिसकी वजह से import export जो है वो और ज़्यादा क्वांटम में इंक्रीज हो गया with the Great Britain. Opening of Suez Canal in 1869 significantly reduced the cost of transportation of goods between Britain and India. Now 1869 is an important date to remember because ये आपके 1 mark questions में आ सकती है. Because this canal served as a direct route for the ships operating between India and Britain, avoiding the African continent altogether. A significant reduction in transport cost promoted monopoly control of India's foreign trade by the British government. That was a bad news for India. Colonial policy of the British government resulted in a monopoly control of India's foreign trade. Exports and imports were largely restricted to between India and Britain for its own benefit, Britain's own benefit, and India's export provided raw material to the British industry, while India's imports provided a huge market for the British machine-made industry. These are typical characteristics of a backward economy, because it's not like we are adding value and selling a product at huge cost in the international market. Instead, we are just draining of our natural resources. Surplus trade, but only to the benefit of Britain. Now, जो हम एक्सपोर्ट करते थे और इम्पोर्ट करते थे, उसके बाद इंडिया का जो नेट बैलेंस ऑफ ट्रेड बचता था वो पॉजिटिव था. मतलब कि हमारे एक्सपोर्ट्स ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल वर मोर देन द इम्पोर्ट ऑफ मशीन मेड ब्रिटेन प्रोडक्ट्स. लेकिन हमारा सरप्लस बैलेंस ऑफ ट्रेड होने के बावजूद भी, हमारे एक्सपोर्ट्स ज़्यादा होने के बावजूद भी, वो जो एक्सेस वेल्थ जनरेशन थी, दैट वाज नॉट री इन्वेस्टेड इनटू आवर इकोनॉमी फॉर इट्स फ्यूचर ग्रोथ. Instead, it was used for their own benefits, for the benefit of the Britishers. How? Now, Britain was handling the entire colony of India, and it definitely needed an administrative setup for the same. A lot of officers were positioned throughout the country for controlling the entire import-export process. Now, this administration cost was basically how did the money came for this handling the entire administrative setup? It came from these balance of trade, the surplus wealth that India generated. And also, since Britain was fighting war during those times, the funds for those wars was also drained using the wealth of India. Basically, it was India's wealth that was utilized for funding these wars. Surprisingly, during the British regime, our exports exceeded our imports. It implied a surplus of balance of trade. But note these points carefully. This surplus was owing largely to the export of primary goods, not the industrial goods, not the value-added goods, which is a sign of economic backwardness because we were exporting raw materials. The trade surplus was not used for the growth and development of the country, not the growth and development of India as a nation. Instead, it was used to meet the administrative expenses of the British government in India and expenses of wars fought by the British government. Administrative and war expenses led to the huge drain of wealth from India. It compounded the backwardness of the Indian economy because it was not like we were growing, but it was still not like we were stagnant because we were moving backward. एक जगह पे हमारी सोशल वेल्थ जो है वो ड्रेन हो रही है, हमारे नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज ड्रेन हो रहे हैं और उसके साथ हमारी फाइनेंशियल हेल्थ भी डिटेरियोरेट हो रही है क्योंकि हमारी जितने भी सरप्लस हम अर्न कर रहे हैं फ्रॉम द ट्रेड विद द ब्रिटेन वो भी हमारी कंट्री में इन्वेस्ट नहीं हो रहा, वो भी ड्रेन आउट हो रहा है. इन द बॉक्स, huge administrative expenses were incurred by the British government to manage their colonial rule in India. Also, huge expenses were incurred by the British government to fight wars in pursuit of their policy of imperialism. I hope you know what imperialism means. It means a stronger company trying to control the weaker ones, fighting a war against them. All these expenses were borne by the Indian exchequer. This implied a drain of India's wealth. Surplus generated as balance of trade was only spent to meet the administrative and war expenses by the British government in India. These expenses led to the huge drain of wealth as it was not used for investment. Consequently, poverty and backwardness were elevated. So this was our first topic, the foreign trade during the regime of Britain. Now let's move to our next topic, topic 6, demographic profile during the British rule. Demographic profile during the British rule. Now what do you mean by demographic profile? अगर आप सबको पता हो तो हमारे देश में हर 10 साल के बाद सेंसस होता है. सेंसस के टाइम पे हमारे घर पे कुछ गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल्स एक फॉर्म लेकर आते हैं और हमसे तरह तरह के सवाल पूछते हैं कि आपके घर में कितने फैमिली मेम्बर्स हैं, कितने लोग पढ़े लिखे हैं, कहाँ तक पढ़े लिखे हुए हैं. तो बेसिकली ये सवाल पूछ के वो एक डेटा बैंक मेंटेन कर रहे होते हैं फॉर द डेमोग्राफिक प्रोफाइलिंग ऑफ पीपल ऑफ द नेशन। डेमोग्राफिक प्रोफाइलिंग इसलिए ज़रूरी है ताकि गवर्नमेंट को आइडिया लग पाए कि कौन से सेक्टर्स जो हैं या कौन से एरियाज़ हैं जो वीक हैं, और ऐसे कौन से एरिया हैं जहाँ पे रिसोर्सेज को एलोकेट करने की रिक्वायरमेंट है फॉर देयर इम्प्रूवमेंट। सो डेमोग्राफिक कंडीशंस ड्यूरिंग द ब्रिटिश रूल ऑन द ईव ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस की बात करें तो बहुत ख़राब थे। नाउ द फैक्टर्स लाइक द बर्थ रेट, डेथ रेट, लिटरेसी रेट आर फ्यू जिनके बेसिस पे हम बता सकते हैं कि हाउ इज द डेमोग्राफिक प्रोफाइलिंग और व्हाट आर द डेमोग्राफिक कंडीशंस ऑफ द पर्टिकुलर नेशन। तो लेट्स स्टडी अ लिटिल अबाउट द डेमोग्राफिक प्रोफाइल ड्यूरिंग द ब्रिटिश रूल। बर्थ रेट एंड डेथ रेट। व्हाट इज बर्थ रेट एंड डेथ रेट? बर्थ रेट डेथ रेट मतलब कि हर 1000 लोगों की पॉपुलेशन के अगेंस्ट द ग्रुप ऑफ 1000 पीपल कितने लोग पैदा हो रहे हैं एंड कितने लोग मर रहे हैं इन अ पर्टिकुलर नेशन। तो ड्यूरिंग द ब्रिटिश रूल बर्थ रेट एंड डेथ रेट बोथ वर रियली हाई। इनके हाई होने का मतलब है कि देयर वाज नो स्टेबिलिटी इन द नेशन। अगर डेथ रेट हाई है इसका मतलब यू आर नॉट हैविंग द एफिशिएंट हेल्थ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इन द इकोनॉमी, हेल्थ फैसिलिटीज़ जो हैं वो अप्रोप्रिएट नहीं है। और अगर बर्थ रेट ज़्यादा है मतलब पीपल आर नॉट एजुकेटेड इनफ। सो बोथ बर्थ रेट एंड डेथ रेट वर वेरी हाई, nearly 48 and 40 per thousand respectively. High birth rate and high death rate suggest a state of massive poverty in the country. Infant mortality rate. What is infant mortality rate? It means कि 1 year तक की एज में कितने बच्चे हैं जो कि जिनकी डेथ हो जाती है, मतलब they are not able to reach the second year of their birth because of lack of healthcare facilities. Infant mortality rate, that is the death rate of children below the age of 1 year per 1000 life, was very high. It was about 218 per 1000, while at present it is 32 per 1000. High infant mortality rate is a sign of poor health care associated with extreme poverty. Life expectancy. Life expectancy means on an average एक particular nation में क्या age है, मतलब what is the average age of a person in the particular nation. Now, during the eve of independence, the average life expectancy, the average age of the person in India was just 32 years. Can you imagine? 32 is the prime age of a particular person now, if we talk of. While on the eve of independence, life expectancy was 32 years. While presently, it is 69.4 years. Low life expectancy reflects lack of healthcare facilities, lack of awareness, as well as lack of means to avail them. Literacy rate. Literacy rate means person who can read and write. कितने प्रतिशत जनता है जो पढ़ लिख सकती है। And when I am talking of पढ़ लिख सकती है, I am not even talking of university degrees of colleges or high school. पढ़ लिख मतलब literally पढ़ लिख सकती है। People who can write their name, who can read their name and maybe sign. And the literacy rate on the eve of independence was just 16%. And 16% people were there who could read and write, not the people who were possessing the college degrees. And if we talk of the female population, just 7% of them was literate, which is showing the high tendency of patriarchy and the gender biasness in the economy. Now, in the box, high mortality rate and low life expectancy are important social indicators of backward and poverty of the masses, obviously. Now, during the British rule, frequent famines and recurring epidemics were the prime causes behind the high mortality rate. इतने लोग मर क्यों रहे थे? Why was life expectancy just 32 years? क्योंकि famines थी. Since our agriculture was rainfall dependent, तो अगर बरसात नहीं होती थी तो food grain production भी नहीं होती थी. Food grain production नहीं होती थी. It ultimately led to famines. And हमारे पास इतना efficient healthcare system नहीं था कि लोगों को treat किया जा सके. There were people who were dying because of simple flu. Why? Because we were lacking in healthcare facilities. And recurring epidemics was a thing that led to the high mortality rate in the country. While famines occurred largely due to droughts, epidemics occurred due to the neglect of public health facilities. Demographic transition. Now, here we'll study कि कैसे अलग अलग सालों में अलग अलग डेमोग्राफिक एरियाज में इंडिया ने टेंडेंसीज शो की. In the history of demographic transition, 1921 is regarded as the year of Great Divide. Now why 1921 is regarded as the year of Great Divide? 1921 तक इंडिया की जो पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ थी वो कभी इंक्रीज हो रही थी, कभी डिक्रीज हो रही थी। एक सेंसस में वो इंक्रीज हो जाती थी, दूसरे सेंसस में वो डिक्रीज हो जाती थी। कोई पर्टिकुलर ट्रेंड या टेंडेंसी शो नहीं करती थी। लेकिन 1921 के बाद इंडिया की पॉपुलेशन सिर्फ ग्रो कर रही थी, इंक्रीज कर रही थी, डिक्रीज नहीं कर रही थी। एंड दैट इज व्हाई 1921 इज नोन एज द ईयर ऑफ ग्रेट डिवाइड। दिस ईयर इज इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज इट कैन कम in your 1 mark questions. Prior to 1921, population growth in India was never consistent. Size of population kept fluctuating, increasing in one census, decreasing in another. After 1921, population in India recorded a consistent rise. Thus, the census 1901 showed a decline of 0.04 crore in total population. Census of 1911 showed a rise of 1.38 crore. Again, the census of 1921 showed a decline of 0.07 crore. But from 1921 onwards, total population in India never declined. It showed a consistent rise. The census 1931 recorded a rise of 2.76 crores. Census of 1941 recorded a rise of 3.96 crore. And the census of 1951 showed a rise of 4.24 crore and so on. 1951 तक जो population growth था वो ठीक ठाक था, modest था। लेकिन 1951 के बाद पॉपुलेशन एक्सप्लोजन हुआ। हमारी पॉपुलेशन बहुत ज़्यादा ग्रो की, जिसकी वजह से हमारा जो मेंटेनेंस इन्वेस्टमेंट था वो इंक्रीज हो गया। नाउ व्हाट इज मेंटेनेंस इन्वेस्टमेंट? इट इज द एक्सपेंस दैट द गवर्नमेंट हैज टू स्पेंड इन मेंटेनिंग इट्स पॉपुलेशन। नाउ अगर हमारे देश में हम 100 रुपये कमा रहे हैं, तो अगर हमारी पॉपुलेशन ज़्यादा होएगी तो उस पॉपुलेशन को मेंटेन करने के लिए हमें ज़्यादा खर्चा करना पड़ेगा। तो जहाँ पे हमें अपने 100 रुपये में से 20 रुपये मेंटेनेंस इन्वेस्टमेंट के तौर पे खर्च करना पड़ता था और हमें 80 रुपये मिलते थे फर्दर इन्वेस्टमेंट के लिए, फॉर द ग्रोथ पर्पसेस, वहीं पे अब हमें 100 रुपये में से 40 रुपये मेंटेनेंस इन्वेस्टमेंट में लगाना पड़ता था और हमें सिर्फ 60 रुपीज़ बचते थे फॉर द इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉर द पर्पसेस ऑफ ग्रोथ। मतलब कि हमारी ग्रोथ की चांसेस जो हैं वो बहुत कम हो गए थे। द consistently rising population on the eve of independence led to excessive burden of maintenance investment. It is an expenditure which a country has to incur on the maintenance of the existing population. उनको खिलाने पिलाने में, उनको employment opportunities provide करने में जो खर्चा करना पड़ता है, that is the maintenance investment. और अगर लोगों को पालने में खर्चा ज़्यादा करना पड़ेगा तो इकोनॉमी की ग्रोथ के लिए जो पैसा बचेगा वो कम होगा, ग्रोथ इन्वेस्टमेंट जो होगी वो कम होगी। When the maintenance investment is high, growth oriented investment remains low. So high maintenance and low growth oriented investment on the eve of independence is another feature of Indian economy pointing towards its backwardness and stagnation. However, the underlying fact is that till 1951, the rise in India's population was never alarming. It ranged from mild to modest. It was only post-1951 that the rise in population became explosive in nature and the country started facing a serious challenge in terms of population explosion. Okay, let's move to our next topic. Topic 7, occupational structure on the eve of independence. Okay, let's move to our next topic. Topic 7 of chapter 1, occupational structure on the eve of independence. Now, what do you mean by occupational structure? As we have already studied, that our economy is divided into 3 sectors. The primary sector, that is the agricultural sector, secondary sector, that is the industrial sector, and tertiary sector, that is the service sector. Now, it is important to know how the population of the country has been divided among these sectors of the economy, because it tells a lot about the health of the economy and about the progressive or depressive nature of the particular economy. Now, occupational structure refers to the distribution of working population across primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors of the economy. Table 2 shows the occupational structure of Indian economy at the time of independence. The data relates to 1951 because reliable statistics for 1947 were not available. Now, see the occupational distribution. In 1951, if you see the percentage of population distribution among different sectors of the economy, 72.7% of the total population was engaged in primary sector, that is agriculture. 10.1% mere 10.1% of the population was engaged in secondary, that is industrial sector, and just 17.2% population was engaged in tertiary, that is service sector. Agriculture, the principal source of occupation. Now, where the contribution of agriculture towards the GDP was just 50%, the people engaged in agriculture was 72.7%, which is an evidence of disguised unemployment. People were not needed in agriculture, but since they didn't have the resources or knowledge, they had to be engaged in agriculture, which means the per hectare of land available per person in agriculture for farming purposes was very low. On the eve of independence, about 72.7% of the working population was engaged in agriculture. Percentage of population dependent on agriculture is much less in advanced countries of the world. For instance, in England and America, mere 2% of the population is engaged in agriculture. In Japan, 12%, and in Germany, 4% of the population is dependent on agriculture. This establishes the backwardness of the Indian economy at the time of independence. I mean, in America, just 2% of people are engaged in agriculture and still they are able to produce the food grains sufficient for the entire population. And we in India had to involve 72.7% of the working population, and still we used to face famines in India जब लोग भूखमरी से मर रहे हैं, and we were even involved in the subsistence based farming. मतलब कि हमारे पास इतनी सरप्लस प्रोडक्शन भी नहीं है उसके बाद कि हम उसको बेच के कोई प्रॉफिट कमाएं. Industry and insignificant source of occupation. Now, as we have seen, overall 10% people were engaged in industry. उसमें से भी सिर्फ 9% working population was engaged in manufacturing sector. Whereas if we compare it with other nations, 32% population in United States, 32% population in United States was involved in industry, that is manufacturing sector. 42% of people in England were involved in industrial sector, and 39% in Japan were engaged in these activities. It further proves how backward the Indian economy was at the time of independence. Unbalanced growth. Now, there was population explosion, people were growing, but the growth of population and the distribution across the different sectors was really unbalanced. Growth is said to be balanced when all the sectors of the economy are equally developed. However, in case of India, secondary and tertiary sectors were in the infant stage of growth. हालांकि यहाँ पर लिखा हुआ है कि secondary and tertiary sector were in the infant stage of growth. I would say even agricultural sector भी बहुत ज़्यादा growth show नहीं कर रहा था. Reason being कि उसके अंदर कोई modern techniques, equipments use नहीं हो रहे थे. And again, we were doing subsistence based farming. हमारे पास surplus produce भी नहीं हो रहा था. We were still dependent upon rainfall. We had fragmented land holdings. So again, even agriculture could have shown great signs of improvement. Hence, the conclusion that Indian economy at the time of independence was lopsided and therefore backward. In the box, greater dependence on agriculture, as suggested by occupational structure on the eve of independence, implied lesser availability of land per head of the farming population. Accordingly, agriculture was taken largely as a means of subsistence and less as the occupation for profit. जब इतने सारे लोग उसके अंदर इन्वॉल्व हो जाएंगे तो पर हेड हाउ कैन वी थिंक कि उसमें प्रॉफिट हो पाएगा? There was disguised unemployment. Assessed in terms of occupational distribution of the working population in India at the time of independence, we get a disappointing picture of Indian economy. Since bulk of the working population was engaged in agricultural sector, along with the fact that agriculture was merely a means of subsistence, Indian economy was in the state of extreme backwardness. The masses led their life in extreme poverty. Okay, let's move to our next topic. Topic 8. Infrastructure on the eve of independence. Okay, let's move to the last topic of this chapter. Topic 8. Infrastructure on the eve of independence. Now, as you know, that infrastructure is something that is important to each one of us, to each of the industry, to each of the sector. Infrastructure can be social infrastructure as well as economic infrastructure. Economic infrastructure includes transportation, communication, your telephone connection, your electricity connection, our banking sector, and social infrastructure, the education, health, housing facilities. These all serve as the foundation for the growth and development of any country. The state of India's infrastructure on the eve of independence can be described in the following observations. Now, what was the state of India in terms of its infrastructure on the eve of independence? Railways. As we know, that Britishers introduced railways in India, not for our benefit, but for their own benefit, so that their finished products, which were just limited to the metropolitans in India, could move to the small cities and towns, and also the raw materials that they needed for their own industries could be collected from all the small cities, towns, and farmers to the ports so that they can then be exported to the Great Britain. Railways were developed to transport finished goods from Britain to the interiors of the colonial India with a view to widening the size of the market penetration. It aimed at widening the size of market for the British products in India. Ports. Now, seaports were developed. Why? Again for the trading purposes, the import of finished products and the export of raw materials. Post and telegraph. Post and telegraph were very much needed for the administrative purposes for the British officials, for managing each and every activity all over the country. And that is why money was invested for its development, for the benefit of the Britishers. Roads were developed to facilitate the transportation of raw material from different parts of the country to the ports. Briefly, some modest infrastructural change in the economy during the British Raj is not denied, but the motive behind this change was not the growth and development of the Indian economy. उनका इन सब चीज़ों के अंदर रेलवेज, रोडवेज, पोर्ट्स, एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के लिए पोस्ट एंड टेलीग्राफ, इन सब पे पैसे लगाने का पर्पस हमारी कंट्री की ग्रोथ या हमारी इकोनॉमी के डेवलपमेंट नहीं थी, बल्कि उनके खुद के मोटिव्स थे. उनके खुद की इंडस्ट्रियल ग्रोथ के मोटिव की वजह से उन्होंने ये सारे के सारे एलिमेंट्स, ये सारा का सारा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इंडिया में बिल्ड किया. कॉन्सिक्वेंटली द इंडियन इकोनॉमी रिमेन्ड टू बी बैकवर्ड बिकॉज ये सारे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के आने की वजह से हमारे नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज और भी ज़्यादा स्पीड से ड्रेन होने लगे, बिकॉज नाउ देयर वाज रेलवेज एंड रोडवेज टू ट्रांसपोर्ट आर नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज टू द पोर्ट्स फॉर फर्दर एक्सपोर्ट, एंड then the Britishers also got the market for their finished products, which was now not just limited to the metropolitan cities and towns. Impact of railways in India. Now railways का इंडिया पे impact दोनों पॉजिटिव भी था, नेगेटिव भी था. पॉजिटिव क्या था? पॉजिटिव ये था कि हमें अपने प्रोडक्ट्स के लिए डोमेस्टिक मार्केट मिली. फार्मर्स जिनका अब तक का आउटलुक जो था वो सबसिस्टेंस बेस्ड था और सिर्फ फूड ग्रेन्स की प्रोड्यूस करते थे खुद को फीड करने के लिए, पोस्ट द इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ रेलवेज एंड कमर्शलाइजेशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर उनको मार्केट की अनसर्टेनिटीज का पता चला एंड दे रियलाइज्ड कि वो भी अपने एग्रीकल्चर से प्रॉफिट्स जो हैं वो अर्न कर सकते हैं. So railways facilitated the expansion of domestic market, exports and imports of the country showed a significant rise. It also facilitated the commercialization of agriculture as goods could then be moved to the distant places. This implied a modest change in the outlook of farmers. They started viewing farming as a business rather than merely as a source of subsistence. Also, the railways enabled people to break the barriers of distance. Now people could move to and fro across different cities, towns, states. जिसकी वजह से इंडिया के अंदर कल्चरल एफिनिटी आई. जब हमें एक स्टेट के इंसान को दूसरे स्टेट के कल्चर, ट्रेडिशन के बारे में नहीं पता था, लेकिन रेलवेज के इंट्रोडक्शन की वजह से वी गॉट टू नो अबाउट द डिफरेंट कल्चर्स, ट्रेडिशंस, डाइवर्सिटीज इन इंडिया एज अ नेशन. फास्टर मूवमेंट ऑफ द फूड ग्रेन्स अक्रॉस डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री. नाउ रेलवेज की इंट्रोडक्शन की वजह से फूड ग्रेन्स की मूवमेंट भी फास्ट हुई. तो जहाँ पे हमारी कंट्री में फेमिन्स की वजह से इतनी डेथ्स हो रही थी, रेलवेज के इंट्रोडक्शन की वजह से हम टाइमली फूड ग्रेन्स को उन ड्रॉट स्ट्रिकन एरियाज तक पहुँचा पाए, जिसकी वजह से फेमिन की वजह से होने वाली डेथ्स का नंबर जो है वो रिड्यूस हो गया. फास्टर मूवमेंट ऑफ फूड ग्रेन्स अक्रॉस डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री हेल्प्ड कंट्रोल द स्प्रेड ऑफ फेमिन्स. Food supplies could reach the people before they were driven to starvation. And then the negative impact. What were the negative impact? Obviously, it was introduced for the purpose of colonial exploitation, for the purposes of imports and exports, for providing raw materials to the Britishers for their industries and market for their machine-made products. Railways contributed to the colonial exploitation of Indian economy because primary goods could then be easily transported from the fields and farms to the ports for the purpose of exports to the British economy. Finished goods coming as imports to the Indian economy could be easily transported to the interiors of the country for the purpose of sale. Thus, spread of railways led to the spread of domestic market for the British products. Was there any positive impact of British rule in India? Intention तो कोई नहीं थी, लेकिन ब्रिटिशर्स के खुद के सेल्फिश मोटिव्स की वजह से कुछ साइड इफेक्ट्स हुए जो इंडिया के लिए पॉजिटिव इम्पैक्ट बन गए. नाउ व्हाट वर दीज? कमर्शियल आउटलुक ऑफ फार्मर्स जो कि फार्मिंग को अभी सिर्फ सब्सिस्टेंस बेस्ड फूड ग्रेन प्रोडक्शन फार्मिंग देखते थे. नाउ दे कुड सी पोस्ट द कमर्शियलाइजेशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर कि वो एक सब्सिस्टेंस बेस्ड फार्मिंग से भी की जगह वो एग्रीकल्चर से प्रॉफिट्स भी अर्न कर सकते हैं. Forced commercialization of agriculture under the British rule exposed the subsistence farmers to uncertainties of market. True, but it also led to the gradual change in outlook of farmers. The farmers started considering market price of the produce as an important determinant of their production decisions. कि मार्केट में क्या प्राइस चल रहा है, क्या डिमांड है, अकॉर्डिंगली क्या सप्लाई होनी चाहिए. How to maintain the prices of the produce. New opportunities of employment. Now, with the advent of railways, since people could move to and fro, तो रूरल एरिया से अर्बन एरियाज पे भी लोगों की शिफ्ट होने लगी. People used to drive from the rural area to the urban area. There were a lot of employment opportunities in roadways, railways, posts, telegrams. Spread of railways and roadways opened up new opportunities of economic and social growth. लोगों को पता ही नहीं था कि उनके पास क्या क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज अवेलेबल हैं, क्या क्या रिसोर्सेज अवेलेबल हैं, लेकिन क्योंकि वो अब एक जगह से दूसरी जगह मूव कर पाए, दे गॉट टू नो अ लॉट अबाउट द काइंड ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटीज दैट आर अवेलेबल, द काइंड ऑफ जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटीज दैट आर अवेलेबल एंड कुड टेक द बेनिफिट फ्रॉम देम. कंट्रोल ऑफ फेमिन्स. नाउ क्योंकि हम टाइमली फूड ग्रेन प्रोडक्शन फूड ग्रेन्स को ड्रॉट स्ट्रिकन एरियाज फेमिन स्ट्रिकन एरियाज तक पहुंचा पाते थे, बेसिकली जिसकी वजह से हम फेमिन्स को कंट्रोल कर पाए. रैपिड मीन्स ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्ट facilitated rapid movement of food grains to the famine affected areas. Accordingly, famines were controlled. Monetary system of exchange. ब्रिटिशर्स के आने से पहले हम बार्टर सिस्टम का यूज़ करते थे, जिसमें हम एक प्रोडक्ट प्रोवाइड करते थे और उसके अगेंस्ट उसकी इक्वलेंट वैल्यू का प्रोडक्ट डिमांड करते थे. क्योंकि इक्वलेंट वैल्यू फैक्टर इन्वॉल्व हो जाता था, जिसकी वजह से ट्रेडिंग डिफिकल्ट हो जाती थी. लेकिन बैंकिंग सिस्टम के आने के बाद एक स्टैंडर्ड यूनिट आई. स्टैंडर्ड यूनिट आने की वजह से हमें इक्वलेंट वैल्यू को कंसीडर करने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ी, जिसकी वजह से ग्रोथ ऑफ मॉनेटरी सिस्टम ऑफ एक्सचेंज फैसिलिटेटेड डिवीजन ऑफ लेबर, स्पेशलाइजेशन, लार्ज स्केल प्रोडक्शन. जहाँ पहले पूरा का पूरा काम फ्रॉम स्टार्टिंग टू एंड एक ही इंसान करता था, अब हमने उस काम को भी पार्ट्स में डिवाइड कर दिया और एक पार्ट को एक ही इंसान करता था, जिसकी वजह से उसमें स्पेशलाइजेशन आई एंड वी वर इन अ पोजिशन कि हम उसको मॉनेटरी टर्म्स में पे कर सकें. We were not looking for a resource equivalent to his service जिसमें हम उसको पे करें. Efficient system of administration. We are well aware कि Britishers के administration system कितना efficient था. We are still using the same administration system which was established by the Britishers long back. This is something that we have definitely got as a side effect to the colonial exploitation. The British government in India left a legacy of efficient system of administration. This served as a ready reference for our politicians and planners and is still used by us. So this is the end of our first chapter of Indian economic development. Our next lecture will be covering chapter 1 from macroeconomics. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you everyone. Bye.